Boring History for Sleep, Daily Life of Noblewomen in the Middle Ages. The Castle and its Age. The year is 1250. We stand before a castle in northern France, Aliquis. It's been standing for nearly 600 years. That's older than Notre Dame, which began construction in 1163. Older than Geoffrey Chaucer, who wouldn't be born until 1343. Nearly older than the French language itself as we know it, which evolved from vulgar Latin between the 6th and 8th centuries. Within its thick stone walls lived a very specific kind of society, one built on hierarchy, land, warfare, and legacy. At the top, the king. Below him, great lords. Below them, lesser nobles. And at the bottom, peasants who worked the land. And in the center of this world, women, noble women, not queens like Alienor of Aquitaine, who ruled in her own right and commanded armies, not princesses like Blanche of Castile, who served as regent of France, but the women who ruled the household, managed estates, and bore the next generation of knights, women whose names history has largely forgotten, but whose labor sustained the medieval world. The architecture of daily life. Before we meet these women, let us understand their physical world. St. Aliquis Castle consists of a keep, the central tower, surrounded by a curtain wall. The keep rises 4 stories. The ground floor houses storage, barrels of salted pork, wheels of hard cheese, sacks of grain, and amphorae of wine. The air here is cool and still, smelling of earth and preservation. The second floor contains the great hall, where meals are taken and business conducted. Its ceiling soars 20 feet high, supported by thick wooden beams of oak, each beam requiring an entire tree trunk. The walls are decorated with tapestries, not for beauty alone, but to keep out drafts. These tapestries are woven from wool, dyed with madder root, for red, woad for blue, and saffron for yellow. A single large tapestry might take 3 women 6 months to complete. The third floor houses the solar, the private chambers of the lord and lady. Here the floors are covered not with rushes like the great hall, but with wooden planks. Small windows, barely wider than arrow slits, provide light. Glass is a luxury afforded only by the wealthiest nobles. Most windows are covered with oiled parchment or thin scraped horn. The 4th floor serves as additional private chambers and storage for the family's most valuable possessions: illuminated manuscripts, silver vessels, silk cloth imported from Constantinople, and spices from the East. Pepper, worth more than its weight in silver. Cinnamon from Ceylon. Cloves from the Moluccas. Born to be married. For noble women, life began with expectation. From birth, her future was not hers to decide. It was managed, arranged, negotiated by men who saw her as a chess piece in a larger game of politics and land acquisition. A daughter of noble blood would be married off for strategic advantage. The dowry system, inherited from Roman law, meant that her family would provide money, land, or goods to secure a favorable match. In return, the husband's family would provide a dower, property that would support her if she became a widow. Her marriage could be promised when she was as young as 7, though canon law, established by the 4th Lateran Council in 1215, set the minimum age of consent at 12 for girls and 14 for boys. But consent, in practice, was a legal fiction. Economic necessity and political advantage trumped personal preference. The marriage contract would specify not just the dowry, but detailed provisions about property rights, inheritance, and even mundane matters like household management. For instance, a contract from 1247 between the houses of Montfort and Beaumont specifies that the bride shall receive 40 marks of silver, 20 ells of fine linen, 6 silver spoons, 1 brass cooking pot, and the income from 3 mills located on the river Oise. She had no say in these negotiations. Medieval law, based on Roman legal principles, classified women as perpetual minors. They could not own property independently, could not enter into contracts without male consent, and could not represent themselves in court. The economics of marriage. Marriage among the nobility was fundamentally an economic transaction. Land was the basis of all wealth and power in medieval society. The feudal system required that all land be held by someone capable of providing military service to their overlord. Since women could not serve as knights, they could not hold land independently. When a noblewoman inherited property, her overlord had the right, and often the obligation, to arrange her marriage to ensure the land remained protected by military service. This right was called wardship, and it could be bought and sold like any other commodity. For example, in 1204, King John of England sold the wardship of the widow Isabel de Clare to William Marshal for 2,000 marks, an enormous sum equivalent to the annual income of a major earldom. Marshal wasn't buying a woman. He was buying the right to control her marriage and, through it, access to her vast estates. The economic calculations involved in noble marriages were staggeringly complex. A marriage contract from 1251 between the houses of Clermont and Nesle runs to 14 pages of closely written Latin, specifying not just the dowry and dower, but also the number of nights the bride's lands owed in military service, 43. The annual income from various properties, 287 livres tournois. Rights to specific mills, forests, and fishing weirs. Obligations to maintain bridges and roads. Shares of income from local markets and fairs. Even the number of pigeons that could be kept in the dovecote, 200 pairs. Preparing for marriage. Take Alienor, a noble maiden of Saint Aliquis, daughter of a minor lord whose holdings consist of 3 villages, 2 mills, and a forest that provides timber and hunting rights. Her days are filled with careful preparation, not for independence or scholarship or leadership in the modern sense, but for marriage and the complex role of managing a noble household. She rises each morning at dawn, marked by the ringing of prime from the castle chapel. Her day begins with prayers, the Ave Maria, the Pater Noster, and a psalm chosen by her confessor. She prays, kneeling on a cushion stuffed with straw, her hands clasped in the prescribed manner, her eyes downcast. After prayers, she breaks her fast with a small meal, a piece of bread, perhaps spread with honey if the castle's beehives have been productive, and a cup of watered wine. The bread is made from wheat flour, a luxury distinguishing noble tables from peasant ones, where bread is made from rye, barley, or even ground acorns during poor harvests. Her education follows a curriculum designed specifically for noble women, based on texts like The Book of the Knight of the Tower, written by Geoffroy de la Tour Landry in 1371. She learns to read and write in French, the language of the nobility. Latin is taught only sufficiently to follow a psalter and understand the prayers of the Mass. She memorizes genealogies, not just her own family's lineage, but those of neighboring houses, potential allies, and enemies. She learns practical skills that will serve her as mistress of a household. The identification and cultivation of herbs, lavender for scenting linens, chamomile for digestive ailments, feverfew for headaches, wormwood for expelling intestinal parasites. She learns to calculate quantities. How many loaves of bread must be baked daily to feed a household of 50? How many barrels of ale must be brewed for the harvest celebration? How many ells of cloth are needed to outfit the servants for winter? Her sewing education is extensive and technical. She learns to work with linen, wool, silk, and fur. She masters different stitches: the running stitch for basic seams, the back stitch for strength, the blanket stitch for finishing edges, the chain stitch for decoration. She embroiders altar cloths for the chapel, using gold thread imported from Cyprus, and silk, dyed with cochineal from Spain. Physical deportment receives equal attention. She practices walking with a measured pace, her hands folded at her waist, her eyes cast down but alert. She learns to sit gracefully, arranging her skirts to cover her feet completely. Her voice is trained to remain soft and melodious. Raised voices are considered vulgar and mannish. Dancing is part of her education, but only specific, approved forms. The carol, a circle dance performed at court festivities. The estampie, a more complex dance involving intricate footwork. These dances have precise rules about hand placement, eye contact, and proximity to male partners. A misstep isn't just awkward, it could be interpreted as immodest or even immoral. Her musical education includes learning to play the psaltery, a stringed instrument similar to a zither, and the recorder. She memorizes songs appropriate for different occasions: hymns for religious observances, courtly lays for entertainment, lullabies for future children. Secular music is carefully supervised. Songs dealing with romantic love are considered potentially corrupting. The daily schedule of noble education. Alienor's day follows a rigid schedule marked by the canonical hours that structure medieval life. Prime, 6 a.m., morning prayers and ablutions. Water for washing is heated over the fire and scented with rose petals or lavender. Soap, made from animal fat and wood ash, is a luxury. More often, washing involves rubbing with coarse linen cloths. Terce, 9 a.m., morning meal and household duties. She oversees the servants who clean the solar, learning to inspect their work. Floors must be swept clean of rushes and debris. Bed linens must be aired and checked for vermin. Chamber pots must be emptied and cleaned with vinegar. Sext, 12 p.m., formal lessons with her tutor, usually a clerk in minor orders who can read Latin and has some knowledge of mathematics. She practices writing with a quill pen on wax tablets, learning to form letters with the proper flourishes. Mathematics consists primarily of practical calculations: how to measure land areas, calculate the amount of seed needed for sowing, determine the yield of various crops. None, 3 p.m. Afternoon activities vary by season. In summer, she might work in the castle's herb garden, learning to identify plants and understand their properties. In winter, she spends more time at indoor tasks, spinning wool into thread, weaving cloth on a small loom, mending household linens. Vespers, 6 p.m., evening meal and social time. This is when she observes how the household functions, watching her sister-in-law, Adela, manage servants and guests. She learns the subtle art of conversation, how to ask questions that show interest without appearing nosy, how to express opinions without seeming argumentative, how to navigate the complex hierarchies of noble society. Compline, 9 p.m., final prayers in preparation for sleep. Her bed consists of a wooden frame, strung with rope, topped with a straw mattress, linen sheets, woolen blankets, and fur coverlets. In winter, servants place heated stones wrapped in cloth at the foot of the bed. The technical skills of household management. The education of a noblewoman includes surprisingly sophisticated technical knowledge. Medieval estates were complex economic enterprises, and their management required skills we might associate with modern business administration. Alienor learns to maintain household accounts using Roman numerals and the complex medieval system of currency. A single transaction might involve livres, pounds, sous, shillings, and deniers, pence, with exchange rates that varied by region and season. She practices calculations on a counting board using jetons, small tokens that represent different values. She studies the calendar of agricultural activities that governs estate management. In January, the focus is on maintenance, repairing tools, mending fences, processing the animals slaughtered in November. February brings preparation for spring planting, cleaning seeds, preparing soil, repairing plows. March begins the planting season, wheat, rye, and barley for the main crops, plus vegetables for the castle's kitchen gardens. The complexity continues through the year. May requires monitoring of pregnant livestock and the first hay cutting. June brings sheep shearing and the second hay harvest. July means the beginning of grain harvest, a critical time when the entire castle community works together to bring in the crops before weather can destroy them. August continues the harvest, with reaping and threshing. September focuses on fruit gathering and wine making. October sees the slaughter of surplus animals and preparation of preserved meats for winter. November brings the collection of rents and taxes from tenants. December is devoted to household preparations for winter and the Christmas celebrations. Each of these activities requires detailed knowledge. For the wine harvest, Alienor learns to judge grape ripeness by color, feel, and taste. She understands the fermentation process, how to maintain proper temperature, when to press the grapes, how to clarify the wine using egg whites or isinglass made from fish bladders. For textile production, she masters the entire process from sheep to finished cloth. She learns to judge the quality of fleece, how to identify the best wool from the shoulders and sides of the sheep, how to separate it from inferior wool from the legs and belly. She understands the process of preparing wool for spinning, washing to remove lanolin, combing to align the fibers, and the careful tension required for spinning consistent thread. The sister-in-law, a model of noble womanhood. Adela, Alienor's sister-in-law and lady of the castle, provides a living example of successful noble womanhood. At 28, she has been married to Baron Conan for 12 years, having been wed at 16 to a man 15 years, her senior, whom she had met only once before their wedding day. Her dowry included estates in Normandy that produce an annual income of 60 livres, plus a collection of household goods that took 4 ox carts to transport, silver vessels, silk and linen textiles, fur-lined cloaks, illuminated prayer books, and a collection of relics, including a fragment of the True Cross, authenticated by the Bishop of Rouen. Adela's daily responsibilities are extensive and varied. She rises before dawn to check the kitchens, ensuring that the day's meals are properly planned and that supplies are adequate. The main meal of the day, served at midday, might feed anywhere from 50 to 200 people, depending on guests and the presence of knights fulfilling their military obligations to Baron Conan. Planning these meals requires sophisticated logistics. The kitchen staff includes a head cook, 2 assistant cooks, a baker, a brewer, servants who maintain the fires, and others who serve at table. Adela must coordinate their activities while managing the castle's food supplies. The castle's larder contains various preserved foods, barrels of salted pork and beef, wheels of hard cheese aged in the castle's cellars, sacks of grain and dried legumes, crocks of preserved fruit, and containers of honey, the primary sweetener in medieval cuisine. Fresh food comes from the castle's immediate surroundings, vegetables from the kitchen gardens, milk and eggs from the dairy, fish from the castle's ponds and nearby streams. Adela monitors these supplies carefully, calculating consumption rates and planning purchases. The account rolls she maintains, written in Latin, record every transaction. Item: purchased from Guillaume the fishmonger, 3 salmon at 8 deniers each, 24 deniers. Item: received from the tithe barn, 12 bushels of rye. Item: sold to the baker in the village, 6 bushels of wheat at 16 deniers per bushel, 8 sous. She also manages the castle's non-food supplies. The storage rooms contain hundreds of items essential to daily life. Candles made from beeswax and tallow, oil for lamps, soap for washing, vinegar for cleaning and preserving, various medicinal herbs, materials for clothing and bedding, tools for maintenance and repair, and equipment for food preparation. The architecture of authority. Adela's authority within the castle is both absolute and contingent. She carries a large ring of keys, a symbol of her position, that appears in countless medieval artworks depicting noble women. These keys unlock the castle's storerooms, but they also represent her role as keeper of the household's resources and guardian of its security. Her keys open the armory, where weapons and armor are stored. While she cannot bear arms herself, she is responsible for maintaining this equipment and ensuring it is available when needed. She oversees the cleaning and oiling of swords, the repair of chainmail, the maintenance of crossbows and arrows. She holds keys to the treasury, where the family's portable wealth is stored: silver vessels, jewelry, coins, and important documents. These rooms are typically located in the most secure part of the castle, often in the keep itself. Access is strictly controlled. Even Baron Conan's own brothers must request permission to enter. Her keys also open more mundane but equally important spaces: the pantry, where spices and luxury foods are kept; the textile storage, where silk and fine woolens are maintained; the wine cellar, where the best vintages are aged. This physical control over castle resources translates into real power over daily life. Servants who wish to access supplies must approach Adela with their requests. She decides who receives what, in what quantities, and when. A cook who needs spices for a special dish, a seamstress who requires silk thread for embroidery, a groom who needs additional oats for horses, all must negotiate with her. Her authority extends beyond material resources to human relationships. She mediates disputes among servants, assigns work schedules, and determines punishments for infractions. When a kitchen maid is caught stealing bread, Adela must decide the appropriate response. When 2 servants argue over responsibilities, she must resolve the conflict. When a new servant is hired, she determines their position in the household hierarchy. The seasonal rhythms of noble life. Medieval life followed seasonal patterns that shaped every aspect of daily existence. Adela's responsibilities shift throughout the year according to these natural cycles. Spring brings intense activity as the castle emerges from winter's constraints. The great spring cleaning begins in March, when servants scrub every surface, Replace soiled rushes with fresh ones, and air out textiles that have absorbed months of smoke and odors. Windows are opened for the first time since autumn, and the accumulated mustiness of winter is banished. This is also when Adela oversees the renewal of the castle's gardens. The kitchen garden must be planted with herbs and vegetables, onions and garlic for flavoring, cabbage and leeks for stews, peas and beans for protein. The medicinal herb garden requires careful attention. Each plant must be sown at the proper time and in the correct location based on its needs for sun, shade, and soil conditions. The flower garden, maintained primarily for aesthetic pleasure and religious symbolism, needs equal care. Roses, lilies, and other flowers mentioned in religious texts are cultivated not just for beauty, but for their spiritual significance. The lily represents the Virgin Mary's purity. The rose symbolizes divine love, and various herbs carry meaning in Christian symbolism. Summer intensifies Adela's supervisory responsibilities. The harvest of early crops requires coordination of the entire household. Even noble ladies participate in some aspects of agricultural work, not the physical labor of reaping and threshing, but the oversight and organization that ensures maximum efficiency. The preservation of food for winter becomes a major concern. Fruits must be dried, pickled, or preserved in honey. Vegetables are stored in root cellars or converted into sauerkraut and other fermented foods that will last through the cold months. Meat is salted, smoked, or made into sausages. Autumn brings the culmination of the agricultural year. The main grain harvest determines whether the coming winter will be one of abundance or scarcity. Adela must ensure that adequate supplies are reserved for the castle's needs, while determining how much surplus can be sold at market. This is also the season for large-scale food preservation. The annual pig slaughter provides meat for the winter months, but every part of the animal must be used efficiently. Nothing can be wasted in a world where survival depends on careful resource management. Winter shifts the focus to indoor activities and maintenance. With agricultural work largely suspended, attention turns to craft production and household management. This is when major textile projects are undertaken: weaving cloth, sewing clothing, creating the elaborate embroideries that decorate religious vestments and household linens. The education of children. One of Adela's most important responsibilities is overseeing the education of the castle's children, not just her own sons François and Anceau, but also the sons and daughters of lesser nobles who have been sent to St. Aliquis to learn proper behavior and form useful connections. Medieval child-rearing practices differed significantly from modern approaches. Children were seen as inherently sinful beings who required strict discipline to develop proper character. Physical punishment was not only accepted, but considered necessary for moral development. Boys and girls received different educations from an early age. By age 7, boys began training in the skills they would need as knights: riding, weapon handling, hunting, and the complex codes of chivalric behavior. They learned to serve at table, care for equipment, and understand the hierarchical relationships that govern noble society. Girls received education focused on their future roles as wives and household managers. In addition to Alienor, the castle houses 3 other young noblewomen: Marguerite, daughter of a neighboring lord; Isabel, whose father died in the Crusades, leaving her a valuable heiress; and Constance, sent by her family to learn household management skills. These girls follow a curriculum that combines practical skills with moral instruction. They learn needlework, but their embroidery projects often depict religious scenes or moral allegories. They study music, but their repertoire consists primarily of hymns and religious songs. They practice reading, but their texts are primarily devotional works, psalters, lives of saints, moral treatises. The goal is to produce women who can manage complex households while maintaining the dignity and moral authority expected of the nobility. This requires a combination of practical competence and spiritual development that medieval educators saw as inseparable. The economics of castle life. The castle of St. Aliquis operates as a complex economic unit that must balance income from various sources against the costs of maintaining a large household and fulfilling military obligations. Income comes primarily from agricultural rents paid by peasant tenants. The barony includes 12 villages, each of which owes specific obligations. Some provide grain, others livestock, still others labor service during planting and harvest seasons. These obligations are recorded in a document called a customal, which specifies exactly what each tenant owes and when it must be provided. Additional income comes from the castle's mills, which peasants are required to use for grinding grain. The miller keeps a portion of the grain as payment, with the remainder going to Baron Conon. The castle also maintains a brewery, a bakery, and workshops for various crafts, all of which generate income. Market rights provide another source of revenue. The castle controls the weekly market held in the nearby town, collecting fees from merchants who set up stalls. During the annual fair, held each September, merchants come from hundreds of miles away to trade, paying substantial fees for the privilege. Legal rights also generate income. As lord of the manor, Baron Conon holds court sessions where disputes are resolved and crimes punished. Fines collected from these proceedings contribute to the castle's treasury. Against these revenues must be balanced significant expenses. The largest cost is maintaining the military forces required by feudal obligation. Baron Conon owes 40 days of night service annually to his overlord, the Count of Champagne. This means maintaining horses, weapons, and equipment for himself and his retainers. Household expenses are also substantial: feeding, clothing, and housing. The castle's residence requires careful budget management. The kitchen accounts show monthly expenditures of 30 to 40 livres during normal periods, rising to 60 or 70 livres when the castle houses additional guests or military forces. Building maintenance represents another major expense. Stone castles require constant repair. Mortar must be renewed, roofs must be rethatched, wooden structures must be replaced as they rot or burn. The castle's accounts record payments to masons, carpenters, thatchers, and other craftsmen whose skills keep the structure habitable. The legal position of women. Understanding the daily life of noblewomen requires grasping their complex legal status within medieval society. Women existed in a state of perpetual dependence, always under the legal authority of a male relative, father, husband, brother, or son. This legal subordination was codified in various legal systems. Under French customary law, women could not inherit land if male heirs existed. They could not make contracts without male consent. They could not serve as witnesses in many types of legal proceedings. They could not initiate lawsuits or defend themselves in court without male representation. However, these restrictions applied primarily to married women. Widows enjoyed significantly more legal freedom, though still within constraints. A widow could control her dower lands, the property assigned to support her during widowhood. She could make contracts related to these lands and represent herself in court regarding dower rights. The legal concept of coverture meant that a married woman's legal identity was subsumed under her husband's. She could not own property separately from him, could not make legal agreements without his consent, and could not be held legally responsible for debts or crimes in the same way men could. Yet within these constraints, medieval women found ways to exercise influence and authority. They could act as their husbands' agents in business transactions. They could inherit and control property under specific circumstances. They could participate in religious institutions that provided alternative sources of authority and influence. The legal system also provided some protections. Canon law prohibited forced marriage, though this protection was often theoretical rather than practical. It also regulated divorce and annulment, providing some recourse for women in abusive marriages, though the requirements for proving grounds were extremely difficult to meet. Religious life and spiritual authority. Religion permeated every aspect of medieval life, and for noble women, religious observance provided both constraint and opportunity. The Church taught that women were inherently inferior to men, the daughters of Eve, who had brought sin into the world. Yet it also offered models of female sanctity and pathways to spiritual authority. Adela's day includes multiple religious observances. She attends Mass daily in the castle chapel, a small but beautifully decorated space with frescoed walls depicting scenes from the lives of Christ and various saints. The altar is adorned with silver vessels and embroidered cloths, many created by the women of the household. Private devotions supplement public worship. Adela owns a book of hours, an illuminated manuscript containing prayers for different times of day. These books were often the most valuable possessions of medieval women, combining spiritual guidance with artistic beauty. Her book includes prayers to the Virgin Mary, psalms for protection, and meditations on the lives of female saints. Religious festivals punctuate the year, each requiring specific preparations that fall under Adela's supervision. Christmas requires preparation of special foods and decoration of the chapel. Easter demands elaborate preparations, including the dyeing of eggs, baking of special breads, and organization of religious processions. The Feast of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, celebrated on August 15th, holds particular significance for medieval women. On this day, Adela organizes special prayers and offerings, seeking the Virgin's intercession for protection during childbirth and guidance in household management. Religious charitable obligations also consume significant time and resources. Medieval Christianity emphasized the importance of almsgiving and care for the poor. Adela oversees the distribution of food to beggars who appear at the castle gates, organizes visits to sick peasants in the surrounding villages, and maintains the castle's small hospital for travelers and the indigent. The art of medieval cooking. Food preparation in a medieval castle was a complex art that required extensive knowledge and sophisticated techniques. Adela oversees a kitchen operation that would challenge modern chefs, working without refrigeration, precise measuring tools, or standardized recipes. The castle's main kitchen centers around a massive fireplace equipped with multiple hearths, spits for roasting meat, and hooks for hanging pots over the flames. Cooking techniques had been refined over centuries to produce varied and flavorful dishes, despite technological limitations. Meat preservation and preparation required particular expertise. Fresh meat was available only during specific seasons, primarily autumn, when surplus animals were slaughtered before winter. The rest of the year, cooks worked with salted, smoked, or dried meats that required careful preparation to make them palatable. Salt pork, a staple of medieval diet, needed soaking and careful cooking to remove excess salt while maintaining flavor. Bacon was smoked, using specific wood combinations that imparted desired tastes. Oak for a strong flavor, apple wood for sweetness, beech for a mild taste. Spice use in medieval cooking was both more complex and more restrained than popular imagination suggests. While the wealthy had access to imported spices, these were used judiciously, both because of cost and because medieval taste preferences differed from modern ones. Pepper, the most common imported spice, was used not just for flavor, but for its believed medicinal properties. Medieval medical theory held that pepper aided digestion and balanced the body's humors. Cinnamon was considered suitable for sweet dishes and was often combined with sugar, itself an expensive import, to create elaborate desserts for special occasions. The preparation of daily bread required sophisticated knowledge of grain types, milling techniques, and fermentation. The castle maintained its own bakery, where different types of bread were produced for different social classes. White bread made from finely ground wheat flour was reserved for the lord's table, while servants ate coarser breads made from rye, barley, or mixed grains. Brewing ale was another complex process overseen by specialized servants under Adela's direction. Medieval ale was a nutritious beverage consumed by all social classes, including children, because it was often safer than water. The brewing process required precise timing and temperature control to achieve consistent results. Textile production and clothing. The production of textiles and clothing in a medieval castle represented one of the most time-intensive and skilled activities under female supervision. Adela oversees a textile operation that supplies clothing, bedding, and household linens for the entire castle community. The process begins with raw materials. Wool comes from the castle's own sheep flocks, supplemented by purchases from neighboring estates. Linen is produced from flax, grown in the castle's own fields. Silk, the most luxurious textile, is imported at great expense from Constantinople or Italian city-states. Wool processing requires multiple specialized skills. After shearing, the fleece must be sorted by quality. The finest wool comes from the shoulders and sides of the sheep, while coarser wool from the legs and belly is used for rougher cloth. The wool is then washed, dried, and combed to align the fibers for spinning. Spinning transforms raw wool into thread using either a hand spindle or a spinning wheel, a relatively recent innovation that increased productivity significantly. The quality of thread depends on maintaining consistent tension and twist, skills that require years to master. Dyeing is perhaps the most complex aspect of textile production. Different colors require different materials and techniques. Red comes from madder root, which must be carefully prepared and applied at specific temperatures. Blue is produced from woad, a plant that requires fermentation to release its coloring properties. Yellow is obtained from various sources, including saffron for the finest shades, weld for everyday use. The most expensive dyes produce the colors associated with high social status. True purple, made from murex shells, costs more than gold and is reserved for royalty. Deep crimson, produced from Kermes insects, is nearly as expensive and marks the highest nobility. Weaving transforms thread into cloth on looms that range from simple hand-operated devices, to large, complex machines tended by multiple workers. The castle's weavers produce various types of cloth: rough woolens for servants' clothing, fine fabrics for noble garments, linen for undergarments and household use. The medical knowledge of noble women. Medieval noblewomen were expected to possess extensive medical knowledge for treating their household's ailments. Professional physicians were rare and expensive, available only in major cities or for the most serious conditions. Day-to-day health care fell to the lady of the castle, who served as doctor, surgeon, and pharmacist for her community. Adela's medical education draws from various sources: classical texts by Galen and Hippocrates, translated into Latin, medieval compilations like the Trotula, a collection of medical treatises attributed to the female physician, Trota, of Salerno, and oral traditions passed down through generations of women. Her medical supplies occupy an entire room in the castle's upper floors. Shelves lined with ceramic jars contain dozens of medicinal herbs, each labeled with its Latin name and therapeutic properties: chamomile for digestive problems and anxiety, feverfew for headaches and fever reduction, comfrey for wound healing and bone fractures, willow bark for pain relief, containing the same compound found in modern aspirin. Treatment methods combine empirical observation with theoretical frameworks inherited from ancient medicine. The theory of the four humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, provides a systematic approach to diagnosis and treatment. Illness is understood as imbalance among these humors, requiring specific interventions to restore equilibrium. Bloodletting, accomplished using leeches or small knives, is employed to reduce excess blood humor. Purging with herbal laxatives addresses imbalances of bile. Dietary modifications help adjust humoral balance. Hot, dry foods for patients with excess phlegm. Cold, moist foods for those with too much yellow bile. Surgical procedures, while limited by available tools and knowledge, are not unknown. Adela can suture wounds using silk thread, set simple bone fractures with splints and bandages, and lance infected wounds to drain pus. She maintains a collection of surgical instruments: sharp knives for cutting, bronze needles for sewing, cauterizing irons for sealing wounds. Obstetric care represents perhaps the most critical aspect of her medical practice. Childbirth mortality was extremely high in the medieval period, threatening both mothers and infants. Adela's knowledge of pregnancy and delivery comes from experienced midwives and from texts like those attributed to Trota of Salerno. She understands the stages of labor and can recognize danger signs that require intervention. Her pharmacy includes herbs specifically for women's health, ergot to stimulate uterine contractions during difficult deliveries, pennyroyal to regulate menstruation, raspberry leaf to strengthen the uterus during pregnancy. Pain management relies heavily on herbal preparations. Poppy extracts provide the strongest pain relief, though their use is carefully controlled due to their potency. More commonly used analgesics include willow bark tea, which reduces both pain and fever, and preparations made from the mandrake root, believed to have powerful sedative properties. Mental health, understood through the framework of humoral theory, receives equal attention. Melancholia, caused by excess black bile, is treated with music therapy, pleasant aromatics, and dietary changes emphasizing warm, moist foods. Mania, attributed to excess yellow bile, requires cooling treatments including cold baths and calming herbs like valerian. The complexity of medieval accounting. The financial management of a medieval castle required sophisticated accounting skills that few modern people would recognize. Adela maintains detailed records using a system derived from monastic practices, recording every transaction in multiple ledgers designed to track different aspects of the estate's economy. The primary account book, written in Latin on parchment pages bound in wooden covers, records daily transactions. Each entry follows a standardized format. Item, die Martis post festum, Sancti Michaelis, receptum de Johanne Molendinario, procensu Molendini, duos solidos. Item, on Tuesday, after the feast of St. Michael, received from John the Miller, for rent of the mill, 2 shillings. These daily entries are supplemented by seasonal summaries that track longer-term trends. The Michaelmas account, September 29th, records the year's agricultural income, rents paid in grain, livestock, and money, profits from mills and markets, fees collected from legal proceedings. The Christmas account focuses on household expenses, food purchases, clothing costs, wages for servants, maintenance, and repair expenses. Currency calculations require constant attention to exchange rates and regional variations. The castle's accounts involve multiple monetary systems: livres tournois, pounds of Tours, used for major transactions; livres parisis, pounds of Paris, used in some legal contexts; and various local coinages that fluctuate in value based on silver content and political stability. A single large purchase might involve several currencies. The account for purchasing war horses in 1249 records: pro duobus equis, emptis, apud nundinam, sancti Dionysii, viginti libras, Turonensis, et quinque solidos, Parisiensis, et decem denarios stamensis, for 2 horses bought at the fair of Saint-Denis, 20 pound tournois, and 5 shillings Parisi, and 10 pence of Étampes. Converting between these currencies requires knowledge of current exchange rates, which fluctuate based on political conditions, silver supply, and seasonal trading patterns. Adela maintains a separate ledger, recording exchange rates at different times and places, essential information for major purchases or sales. Credit transactions add another layer of complexity. Medieval commerce relied heavily on credit relationships, with payments often deferred for months or even years. The castle's accounts include numerous entries for debts owed and debts to be collected, each carefully tracked, with interest calculations and payment schedules. The social hierarchy of the household. The castle of St. Aliquis houses approximately 300 people, arranged in a complex social hierarchy that determines every aspect of daily life. Understanding this hierarchy is essential to comprehending the authority exercised by women like Adela and the constraints within which they operate. At the apex sit Baron Conan and Adela, whose authority derives from their control of land and their position in the feudal system. Immediately below them are family members, Alienor, various cousins and relatives, and children being educated in the household. The next tier consists of household knights and clerical staff. Sir Geoffroy serves as seneschal, managing the castle's military affairs and representing the baron in his absence. Brother Anselm, a Benedictine monk, serves as chaplain and maintains the castle's small library of religious texts and legal documents. Master William, a clerk trained in law and administration, handles correspondence and legal affairs. Below these officials are the specialized craftsmen essential to castle operations. Master Jacques the armorer maintains weapons and armor, his workshop filled with the tools necessary for metalworking: forge, anvil, hammers, and files. Master Pierre the Mason oversees building maintenance and construction projects, supervising a crew of stoneworkers whose skills keep the castle habitable. The textile workshop operates under the supervision of Dame Margot, an older woman whose expertise in weaving and dyeing makes her invaluable to household operations. She oversees 6 women who handle different aspects of cloth production: spinning, weaving, dyeing, and sewing. These women enjoy higher status than ordinary servants because of their specialized skills. Kitchen operations require their own hierarchy. Master Cook Robert directs food preparation with the assistance of 2 undercooks, a baker, a brewer, and numerous servants who maintain fires, carry water, and clean equipment. During feast days, additional temporary workers are hired from the surrounding villages to handle increased demand. Stable operations fall under the direction of Master Grooms Hugh, who manages the castle's horses with the help of several grooms and stable boys. Medieval warfare and transportation depended entirely on horses, making their care a matter of strategic importance. The castle maintains different types of horses for different purposes: destriers for heavy cavalry, palfreys for riding, pack horses for transportation, and draft horses for agricultural work. Agricultural operations, while primarily located outside the castle walls, require coordination with household activities. Bailiff Thomas manages the castle's agricultural estates, reporting regularly to Baron Conan and Adela about crop conditions, tenant obligations, and seasonal labor requirements. At the bottom of the hierarchy are the general servants who perform the basic labor that keeps the castle functioning. They clean chambers, carry water, tend fires, wash clothing, and perform countless other tasks. These servants are typically peasants from the surrounding villages who work in the castle to fulfill labor obligations or earn money wages. Even among servants, distinctions exist. Personal servants who work directly for the noble family enjoy higher status than those who perform general labor. Chambermaids, who clean the solar and handle personal clothing, are considered superior to kitchen servants who scrub pots and carry firewood. The ritual calendar of medieval life. Medieval life followed a complex calendar of religious and secular observances that structured the year and required extensive preparation under female supervision. Each major feast day demanded specific preparations that fell largely to the lady of the castle and her female assistants. The Christmas season, extending from Advent through Epiphany, represents the most elaborate celebration of the medieval year. Preparations begin in early December with the decoration of the castle chapel and great hall. Evergreen boughs are gathered from the forest and woven into garlands. Holly, ivy, and mistletoe, plants that remain green through winter, symbolize eternal life and hope for spring's return. Special foods must be prepared for the Christmas feast. The kitchen works for days to create elaborate dishes: roasted peacock redressed in its feathers, subtleties, decorative food sculptures depicting religious scenes, honey cakes shaped like stars and angels, and various preserved fruits and nuts saved throughout the year for this celebration. The 12th night feast on January 6th requires its own preparations. A special cake containing a hidden bean is baked, and whoever finds the bean becomes king or queen of the evening's festivities. This temporary reversal of social order, sanctioned by religious tradition, allows servants to mock their superiors in ways normally forbidden. Easter preparations begin with Lent, the 40-day period of fasting and penance, that requires careful menu planning. Meat is forbidden during Lent, making fish the primary protein source. The castle's fish ponds must be managed to ensure adequate supply, and arrangements must be made with fishmongers to supplement local sources. The elaborate Easter feast breaks the Lenten fast with specially prepared foods. Eggs, forbidden during Lent, are dyed with various natural substances: onion skins for yellow, red cabbage for blue, beets for red. Special breads are baked in symbolic shapes: lambs representing Christ, crosses commemorating the crucifixion, and circular loaves symbolizing eternal life. Pentecost, celebrated 50 days after Easter, requires decoration of the chapel with flowers and green branches, representing the renewal of spiritual life through the Holy Spirit. Rose petals are scattered on the chapel floor, and special red vestments are used to commemorate the tongues of fire that appeared to the apostles. The Feast of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary on August 15th holds particular significance for medieval women. Special prayers are offered for protection during childbirth, and women make pilgrimages to local shrines dedicated to the Virgin. Adela organizes these devotional activities while ensuring that the castle's operations continue smoothly during the religious observances. Secular celebrations also require extensive preparation. May Day festivities include the gathering of flowers for garlands and the erection of a maypole around which the castle's young people dance. Harvest festivals celebrate the successful completion of agricultural work with communal feasts featuring the year's new grain baked into bread and ale brewed from fresh hops. Wedding celebrations, whether for family members or castle servants, require weeks of preparation. Food, music, and decorations must be arranged, and the complex protocols governing medieval wedding ceremonies must be observed. The bride's trousseau, her collection of household goods and clothing, must be assembled, inspected, and formally presented. The education of Alienor, advanced training. As Alienor approaches marriageable age, her education intensifies and becomes more specialized. At 15, she is considered nearly ready for the responsibilities of managing her own household, though her marriage negotiations have not yet been concluded. Her training now includes direct participation in estate management under Adela's supervision. She learns to read and interpret the complex documents that govern medieval property relationships. Feudal contracts specifying military obligations, tenant agreements detailing agricultural rents, and marriage contracts outlining dower rights and inheritance provisions. Legal knowledge becomes increasingly important. She must understand the different types of tenure by which land is held: fee simple, fee tail, life estate, and dower right. Each type carries different obligations and privileges that affect inheritance patterns and widows' rights. The practical aspects of justice administration receive attention. When Baron Conan holds court to settle disputes among his tenants, Alienor observes the proceedings from behind a screen, learning how legal principles are applied to real situations. She watches cases involving property boundaries, debt collection, assault accusations, and marital disputes. Contract negotiation skills are developed through supervised practice. She participates in discussions with merchants who visit the castle, learning to evaluate the quality of goods, negotiate prices, and structure payment terms. These skills will be essential when she manages her own household's procurement needs. Military knowledge, while limited by her gender, includes understanding castle defense principles. She learns to recognize the signs of potential attack, understand the function of different defensive features, and coordinate the activities necessary to withstand a siege. She studies the castle's water supply, food storage capacity, and escape routes. Diplomatic skills receive considerable attention. Medieval politics required constant negotiation among competing noble families, and women played important roles in these discussions. Alienor practices the art of persuasive conversation, learning to advocate for positions without appearing argumentative, to gather information without seeming intrusive, and to build alliances through careful relationship management. Her religious education deepens as well. She studies theological texts that provide intellectual frameworks for understanding Christian doctrine. Her Latin improves to the point where she can read complex theological arguments and participate in discussions about religious questions. Correspondence skills become crucial as her marriage approaches. Medieval noble marriages often involved extended negotiations conducted largely through letters. She practices writing in the formal style required for diplomatic correspondence, learning the proper forms of address for different ranks of nobility, and the subtle language used to convey political positions. The economics of marriage negotiations. As Alienor reaches marriageable age, the economic calculations surrounding her future become increasingly complex. Her marriage will represent not just a personal union, but a merger of economic interests that must benefit both families involved. Baron Conan's negotiations with potential suitors involve detailed analysis of land values, income projections, and strategic advantages. Alienor's dowry has been accumulating since her birth. Money set aside each year, land designated for her inheritance, and valuable goods collected for her marriage chest. Her dowry currently includes 300 livres in silver coins, an annual income of 40 livres from mills and market rights, a collection of silk and linen textiles worth approximately 50 livres, and various precious objects, including silver vessels, jewelry, and illuminated manuscripts. Potential suitors must offer corresponding value in the form of dower rights, property that will support Alienor if she becomes a widow. These negotiations require careful legal analysis to ensure that the dower lands are genuinely valuable and not subject to competing claims or excessive obligations to overlords. The strategic value of different marriage alliances receives equal consideration. An alliance with the House of Montfort would strengthen Baron Conan's position in regional politics, but might antagonize the rival House of Beaumont. A marriage connection to a family with holdings in Normandy could provide valuable trading opportunities, but would also create obligations to participate in Norman political conflicts. Military considerations influence these calculations. The feudal system requires that all land be held by someone capable of providing military service. Alienor's future husband must be able to fulfill the military obligations attached to her dowry lands, maintaining knights, providing castle guard service, and participating in his overlord's military campaigns. The age and health of potential suitors receive careful scrutiny. A young, healthy husband offers the prospect of many years of marriage and numerous children, but might also be more likely to engage in dangerous military activities. An older, established husband provides immediate stability, but might leave Alienor a widow at a young age. Personal compatibility, while not the primary consideration, is not entirely ignored. Baron Conan recognizes that a harmonious marriage will be more productive and less likely to create political complications. Alienor's opinions are solicited, though her preferences carry less weight than economic and political factors. the daily life of pregnancy and childbirth. When Adela becomes pregnant with her third child, the event transforms not just her daily routine, but the entire rhythm of castle life. Medieval pregnancy was fraught with dangers that required constant attention and extensive preparation. The pregnancy is announced to the household through a series of ritual observances. Special prayers are offered at Mass for the safety of mother and child. A pilgrimage is organized to a local shrine dedicated to Saint Margaret, patron saint of childbirth. Charitable donations are increased to secure divine favor for a safe delivery. Adela's daily activities are gradually modified as the pregnancy progresses. Heavy lifting and strenuous activity are avoided, though she continues to oversee household operations. Her diet is carefully regulated according to medieval medical theory. Foods considered hot and dry are emphasized to balance the cold and moist nature attributed to pregnancy. The castle's female community rallies around the expectant mother. Experienced women share advice about managing pregnancy symptoms, recommend herbal remedies for morning sickness, and begin preparing the supplies that will be needed for delivery and the postpartum period. Preparation for childbirth begins months in advance. A birthing chamber is designated and prepared according to traditional requirements. The room is thoroughly cleaned and blessed by the chaplain. Tapestries are hung to eliminate drafts. A birthing stool is constructed by the castle's carpenters according to specifications passed down through generations of midwives. Medical supplies are assembled under the supervision of Dame Beatrice, an elderly woman whose experience with childbirth makes her the castle's unofficial obstetric expert. Her collection includes herbs to stimulate labor contractions, substances to control bleeding, and preparations to ease pain during delivery. The social aspects of childbirth preparation are equally important. Lists are compiled of women who will attend the birth, each with specific responsibilities during labor and delivery. Arrangements are made for prayers to be offered continuously in the chapel during labor. Plans are developed for announcing the birth and organizing the celebrations that will follow a successful delivery. As the time of delivery approaches, the entire castle's routine is modified. Extra servants are assigned to maintain the birthing chamber. Special foods are prepared that are considered appropriate for women in labor. Religious relics are brought to the chamber to provide spiritual protection. The actual birth is attended only by women, following traditions that exclude men from the birthing chamber. Dame Beatrice serves as the primary midwife, assisted by several experienced women from the castle and neighboring estates. Their knowledge, passed down through oral tradition, includes techniques for managing difficult deliveries, recognizing danger signs, and providing postpartum care. Pain relief during labor relies on herbal preparations and spiritual comfort. Prayers are recited continuously, and religious medals are placed on the laboring woman's body. Herbal preparations include willow bark, tea for pain relief, and ergot preparations to strengthen uterine contractions when labor is prolonged. The successful birth is announced to the castle community through the ringing of bells. The sex of the child determines the pattern of bell ringing, a complex sequence for a boy, a simpler pattern for a girl. Celebrations are organized according to the child's gender and the family's status. Baptism follows within days of birth, reflecting medieval concerns about infant mortality and the fate of unbaptized souls. The ceremony is elaborate, involving godparents chosen for their social status and spiritual worthiness. The baptismal feast that follows provides an opportunity to strengthen political alliances and social connections. The management of seasonal festivals. Each season brings its own cycle of festivals and celebrations that require extensive planning and coordination under Adela's supervision. These observances combine religious devotion with social celebration and practical necessity, creating elaborate events that strengthen community bonds while marking the passage of time. The spring festival of Easter requires perhaps the most complex preparations of the year. Lenten fasting restrictions have limited the castle's diet for 40 days, making the Easter feast a celebration of abundance and renewal. Planning begins weeks in advance with the careful preservation of eggs, forbidden during Lent, that will be dyed and distributed as symbols of resurrection. The Easter feast itself involves elaborate food preparation. Fresh lamb, symbolizing Christ's sacrifice, is slaughtered and prepared with herbs that have been carefully cultivated in the castle gardens. Special breads are baked in symbolic shapes, crosses commemorating the crucifixion, fish representing Christ's disciples, and circular loaves symbolizing eternal life. The castle's ale supply receives special attention for Easter celebrations. Winter brewing has provided adequate stores, but the Easter feast requires higher quality ale than daily consumption. Special batches are brewed using the finest malt and hops, flavored with herbs and honey, to create beverages worthy of the celebration. Decoration of the castle and chapel requires coordination of numerous activities. Flowers must be gathered from gardens and meadows, arranged into garlands and altar decorations. Candles made from pure beeswax replace the tallow candles used during Lent. Religious vestments are cleaned and repaired, and silver vessels are polished to gleaming perfection. The summer celebration of Midsummer's Eve on June 23rd combines Christian observance of St. John the Baptist with older traditions celebrating the summer solstice. Bonfires are lit on the castle's highest towers, visible for miles around, and answered by similar fires from neighboring estates. These fires serve both ceremonial and practical purposes, as their smoke helps drive away the insects that plague both humans and livestock during summer months. Special foods associated with midsummer include honey cakes baked in the shape of suns and moons, fresh cheese made from the rich milk of cattle feeding on summer pastures, and early fruits preserved in honey. Herb gathering reaches its peak during this season, as many medicinal plants achieve their maximum potency during the long days around the solstice. The Autumn Harvest Festival celebrates the completion of agricultural work and the security provided by full granaries and storehouses. This celebration involves the entire castle community, from the highest nobles to the humblest servants, in recognition of their mutual dependence on successful harvests. The harvest feast features foods that demonstrate the year's agricultural success. Fresh bread baked from new grain, ale brewed from fresh hops, roasted meats from animals fattened on summer pastures. The communal nature of the feast reinforces social bonds while celebrating shared achievement. Winter celebrations center around Christmas and the associated 12 days that extend through Epiphany on January 6th. These celebrations provide light and warmth during the darkest period of the year, maintaining morale and community solidarity through the most challenging season. The Christmas feast represents the pinnacle of medieval hospitality. Every aspect of castle life is focused on creating an elaborate celebration that demonstrates the Lord's prosperity and generosity. Guests from neighboring estates are invited, creating opportunities for political discussion and alliance building while sharing the season's joy. The complex world of medieval medicine Adela's responsibilities as the castle's primary healthcare provider require extensive knowledge of medical theory and practice. Medieval medicine combined classical learning inherited from Greek and Roman sources with folk traditions passed down through generations of healers. The theoretical foundation of medieval medicine rests on the concept of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health is understood as balance among these humors, while illness results from their imbalance. Treatment focuses on restoring proper humoral balance through diet, exercise, bloodletting, purging, and herbal remedies. Diagnostic techniques rely primarily on observation and interview. Adela examines patients by looking at their complexion, feeling their pulse, examining their urine, and asking detailed questions about symptoms. The color, consistency, and odor of urine provide particularly important diagnostic information, as medieval medical theory holds that urine reflects the balance of humors within the body. Herbal medicine forms the core of medieval therapeutics. Adela maintains an extensive pharmacy of medicinal plants, each carefully harvested at the optimal time and properly preserved. Her collection includes dozens of herbs, each with specific therapeutic properties, understood through centuries of observation and experimentation. Feverfew, gathered during its flowering period and dried in small bundles, is used to treat headaches and reduce fever. The herb must be harvested on a dry morning after the dew has evaporated, but before the sun becomes too hot, as moisture or excessive heat can reduce its therapeutic potency. Comfrey root, dug in autumn when the plant's energy is concentrated in its underground parts, provides treatment for wounds and broken bones. The root is cleaned, sliced, and dried, then ground into powder that can be mixed with wine or water to create healing poultices. Willow bark, carefully stripped from young branches in early spring, contains natural compounds that reduce both pain and fever. The bark is dried and ground, then steeped in hot water to create a bitter tea that provides relief from various ailments. Surgical procedures, while limited by available tools and knowledge, are not unknown in medieval medical practice. Adela can perform simple operations, cleaning and suturing wounds, setting broken bones, lancing infected areas to drain pus. Her surgical instruments include sharp knives made by the castle's metalworkers, needles for stitching wounds, and cauterizing irons for sealing blood vessels. Bloodletting, considered essential for treating many conditions, is performed using various techniques. Leeches, maintained in special containers filled with clean water, provide controlled bloodletting for delicate areas. Cupping, using heated glass vessels to create suction on the skin, removes blood from specific body regions. Direct cutting of veins, performed with sharp knives, allows removal of larger quantities of blood when theory indicates this treatment is necessary. Mental health receives attention through approaches that combine medical treatment with spiritual counseling. Melancholia, characterized by excessive sadness and withdrawal, is treated with music therapy, pleasant aromatics, and dietary changes emphasizing foods considered warm and moist in nature. Conclusion: the intricate web of medieval womanhood. The daily life of noblewomen in medieval Europe reveals a world of extraordinary complexity, where women navigated intricate webs of authority, responsibility, and constraint. Within the stone walls of castles like St. Aliquis, women like Adela and Alienor managed sophisticated economic enterprises, maintained complex social hierarchies, and sustained the cultural traditions that defined medieval civilization. Their lives were simultaneously powerful and powerless. They commanded hundreds of people, controlled vast resources, and made decisions that affected entire communities. Yet their authority derived from their relationships to men and could be revoked at any moment by death, divorce, or political circumstance. The medieval noblewoman was educator and student, manager and managed, authority figure and subordinate. She preserved medical knowledge that saved lives, maintained household economies that supported entire communities, and passed on cultural traditions that connected past and future generations. Her world was one of careful calculation and constant vigilance, where a single mistake could have catastrophic consequences. She balanced competing demands with skills that would challenge modern managers, working without the tools and resources we consider essential to complex organizations. The castle walls that protected her also confined her, creating a world that was both sanctuary and prison. Within those walls, she created spaces of warmth, beauty, and comfort that sustained human life and culture through centuries of political upheaval and social change. As we drift towards sleep, we might remember these women who lived lives of quiet, heroism, managing the countless details that kept medieval civilization functioning. Their stories remind us that history is made not just by kings and knights, but by the patient work of countless individuals whose names have been forgotten, but whose labor sustains every human community. In the candlelit chambers of medieval castles, women spun thread and wove cloth, prepared medicines and delivered babies, managed accounts and negotiated agreements, taught children and comforted the dying. Their work was essential, their knowledge vast, their influence profound. And so, as the darkness deepens and our own daily concerns fade into the background of approaching sleep, we can imagine the rhythm of their lives, the measured pace of seasons and festivals, the careful preparation of meals and medicines, the quiet conversations that shaped the future, the steady work that sustained a civilization. The medieval world sleeps now, its castles ruins, its people dust. But their legacy lives on in the countless ways human beings organize themselves into communities, care for one another, and pass on knowledge to future generations. In that continuity, we find both comfort and connection to the long human story of which we are all part.